Okay.
Yeah, you can start. Yeah, Mukund.
Yeah. Okay. So, thanks again for everyone to for logging in. Appreciate it. And we have probably one of the most interesting sessions here with ICICI Bank. Uh, Most of you should know the brand name, despite it being an Indian bank. ICICI is one of the strongest brand names in India. It has been a very well-performing privately owned bank in India that has benefited from the fundamental tailwinds for banking. And it would be great if Mr. Banerjee, if you could talk us through the opportunities that you have benefited from over the last 5 years, the challenges that exist today in the business, and what the outlook is going forward, given that you've taken on the impacts of the change in the environment for banking, the Insolvency Act, COVID, all the changes that are occurring. If you could throw light on the Indian banking sector, as well as how ICICI is responding and moving forward from here.
Hi, sure. Good, I guess good morning or good afternoon to everyone who's joined in, and thank you for taking the time. My name is Anindya Banerjee. I am the head of investor relations and strategy at ICICI Bank. I'm currently into my 20s, almost finishing 22 years with this organization. I also have two of my colleagues, Ashwij Malya and Niyati Shah, who are part of the investor relations team. They are with us on this call. So, in terms of a brief introduction about the Indian banking system and ICICI Bank more specifically, which has evolved quite rapidly over, I would say, the last 2 decades. So, if we look back into maybe 25 years ago, Indian banking was dominated by the public sector banks, which were majority state-owned, and their business was largely focused on deposit taking and on lending to businesses. So the whole consumer lending piece, from mortgages to credit cards, was a pretty tiny business in India at that time, largely dominated by a few foreign banks, which cater to really the higher end of the population, and by some non-bank finance companies. Over the last 20 years, the two changes have happened. One, the private sector banks have become much larger, and today are about 30% of the market. And the the big private sector brand names in terms of banking that you hear now, HDFC Bank, ICICI Bank, Axis Bank, Kotak Mahindra Bank, are really a creation of this period. The second, and this shift in market share in terms of the growth of the private sector banks has happened. I think started with the lending side of the business, particularly on the retail side, where these banks brought a customer friendly approach, much more technology, much more service orientation, but has over a period of time resulted in a significant shift in the deposit market share as well. Particularly over, I would say, the last 3 years, the shift in deposit market share from the public to the private sector has been fairly pronounced. The second big change which happened in Indian banking and reflective of the Indian economy itself is the growth of retail as a big driver of banking businesses, with the increasing demand for things like mortgages, auto loans, credit cards, personal lending, and so on. And as I mentioned, the private sector banks have been the major sort of beneficiaries of that shift. We've also seen, again, this is a continuing thing, and it has sort of gathered momentum, I would say, in the last 3 years, a big shift towards technology and digital in banking and in the way customers interact with their banks and banks operate internally. And here again, I think the private sector banks, which sort of started from scratch and didn't really have a legacy of operating in a particular way, have been more nimble and more able to take advantage of evolving technologies to kind of improve the offering to the customer and the customer experience. The Indian banking sector saw, a fair degree of growth in the 2000 to 2010 period as the fruits of economic reforms undertaken in the 90s came into effect. In the decade, driven, as I said, significantly by growth on the retail side of the business. In the early 2010 decade, India had a huge investment boom across areas like mining, steel, infrastructure, power, and so on. And therefore, banks participated quite heavily in that side of the business. And those banks which did so ended up experiencing significant NPLs over the period 2015 onwards, as a large number of those investments did not really yield the returns or bear fruit in the manner in which they had been expected to, which resulted in a big rise in NPLs and in provisioning costs. Over the last couple of years, I think the trends that we have seen are that the NPL additions have moderated, provisioning coverage has built up, provisions have, charges have come down. Market share has continued to shift from the public to the private sector banks, and technology and digital have become more and more important. There is also been, a sort of consolidation, I think, within the banking sector, not through, acquisitions or M&A, but through a market share shift. So, the customer preferences or the market shares in terms of incremental business have really consolidated in the favor of the top 3 or 4 players who have capital, liquidity, and the operating capability, including technology, to meet customer needs. So, maybe coming specifically to ICICI Bank for a few minutes, and then maybe the coordinators could open it up. So, ICICI is actually more than a 65-year-old institution. It was formed in 1955 and as a development bank. And for the first sort of 40 years of its existence, all ICICI Bank did, ICICI as it was called, they did was to raise money from wholesale lenders and investors and lend to private sector projects in India, mainly in the manufacturing or industrial space. From the 1990s, ICICI changed its strategy quite substantially. It ventured into commercial banking and ultimately became, a full-fledged commercial bank in the early 2000s. It began to build up a retail deposit and lending business. It also, led kind of the introduction of technologies like internet banking, mobile banking, and so on into the Indian marketplace. And along with, venturing into commercial banking and retail, it also started a number of non-banking financial services businesses, which have now become quite large. And these are life insurance, non-life or PNC insurance, asset management, that's the mutual fund business, and securities broking. So if we look at it today, ICICI Bank is the second largest private sector bank in India. We have about 5,300 branches and more than 15,000 ATMs. At the bank level, about 62% of our loan portfolio is retail, and about the balance is the corporate and SME business. We have a relatively small proportion, about 8%, 8.5% of our loan portfolio in our offshore branches, mainly in Asia, which includes a mix of lending to Indian companies and lending to global and local corporations. We have, in addition to the bank, which is the listed sort of commercial bank as well as the listed parent, we have three listed subsidiaries. ICICI Prudential Life Insurance, which started as a joint venture with Prudential of the UK, is one of the larger life insurance companies in India. And it's a listed entity with a market cap of about $7 billion. $7 billion US. We hold about 53% of the company. ICICI Lombard General Insurance is the PNC arm, which again is a listed company with a market cap of over $7 billion. The bank owns about 56% of the company. Our broking subsidiary, which is a smaller market cap of about $1.6 billion. ICICI Securities is a full-service investment bank and equity broking company. It operates a very large online equity trading platform called ICICI Direct, and we own about 80% of the company. The market value of our holdings in the listed subsidiaries is about $9 billion. I think for our history over the last 20 years has substantially followed the trajectory that I outlined earlier. Rapid growth, in the 2000 to 2008 period, some slowdown following the global financial crisis, then growth again with a reasonably large focus on the corporate side. A pretty bad NPL in the mid 2010s, and a focus on balance sheet repair and other value creating parts of the business over the last few years. In 2018, we had a change in the leadership of the bank with the current CEO Sandeep Bakhshi taking over. And, I think our emphasis since then has been basically to grow the core operating profits of the bank in a risk calibrated and granular manner. We have kind of two sort of internal slogans that we operate around. One is one bank, one ROE, which basically tries to break down silos within the bank and make sure that we take the full bank to the customer and derive the maximum return for our efforts. And the other, which is equally important, is fair to customer, fair to bank. We don't want to make money by, doing things that create a dissonance among customers or result in loss of value to customers, in the long term. I think maybe I'll just give a couple of numbers and then we close and take questions. We had an operating profit growth of over 20% last year, and ended the year after taking some provisions relating to COVID, etc., which I'm sure we can talk about more, with a common equity tier 1 capital of 13.4%. So we believe we have a strong capital base, a very strong deposit franchise, and great delivery systems for serving customers with a full range of products, which should see us grow profitably as we go along. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Appreciate it. And there are some questions that are coming through. So obviously, financials as a sector globally has come under some pressure as a result of COVID. How are you dealing with it? India's history has been some issues around corporate borrowing and corporate lending. Going forward, it looks like there may be some concerns around the retail side. You can correct me if I'm wrong. How is ICICI Bank sort of positioned to deal with this?
Yeah, so I'll, answer it in kind of three parts. So, first of all, I think, as you know, India also has experienced, we are currently, I think, number 10 in the world in number of cases, which is a dubious distinction. But we went into kind of a national lockdown in the last week of March, and that is still continuing. It's we eased somewhat in some parts of the country, but in some of the centers is likely to continue for some more time. I think our first, priority was to ensure that we served our customers well during this period, and also took care of the safety and health of our customers and employees. So I think this is where the strength in technology and the digital platforms really came into play. Shortly before the lockdown started, we had launched what we call the ICICI Stack, which is a set of existing and new applications which allow retail and business customers to do virtually everything that they want to do in terms of banking remotely without interacting with the bank physically. And I think through the last, it's been more than 2 months now, we have, maintained pretty high levels of service continuity. The second aspect was that how do we assess this risk and how do we position the balance sheet well for it? So I think, as you said, that this is not something that we can say will be limited to corporate or to retail. But this is a simultaneous global shock, not just in India, in across most relevant markets and economies. And therefore, this risk transmits itself through multiple channels, whether it is commodity prices, whether it is employment in India by global corporations, whether it's the revenues of local small businesses that are impacted due to the lockdown. So we conducted a sort of detailed assessment of our portfolio, which we kind of articulated to the market as well. When we announced our results 3 weeks ago, where we went portfolio by portfolio and tried to see what could be the outcomes there based on certain assumptions, and partly as a result of that, we also took some additional provisions in our March quarter results, which were intended to cushion the impact of this challenge. And I think the conclusion that we came to was that was two things. One is that I think we are pretty confident of the underwriting that we have done over the last 3-4 years, whether it's on the corporate side or on the retail side. So I think our corporate underwriting, first of all, our portfolio mix has shifted more towards retail, and within the retail, we have a relatively larger proportion of the secured products like mortgages and a relatively smaller proportion of the unsecured products, which is personal loans and credit cards. I think in general, overall, our retail portfolio is essentially geared towards, an affluent, mass affluent kind of customer profile. In India, we don't really have any material, subprime or, lower income segment kind of lending. On the corporate side, also, we have granularized the portfolio a lot. We have moved it to a higher rating profile. And I think the corporate sector itself has consolidated and strengthened quite a bit over the last 3 or 4 years. So I think going into this, the portfolio was in decent shape. And when we assess the potential impact, look at our current capital level, our current provisioning coverage, the additional provisions that we have taken, and the level of operating earnings that we continue to generate, we are we feel that we will be, pretty well able to absorb the impact of COVID based on, some likely scenarios.
Thank you. There's also of late been, stimulus packages.
That's right.
Stimulus is loan moratoriums or deferment of interest payments and so on. So perhaps some of the stimulus is being passed through the financial system. How does that impact, the bank, and what percentage of your customers have chosen to take up this loan moratoriums or deferment of payment?
Yeah, so yes, that was one of the early measures which was announced in late March, because as I mentioned, this is a global and domestic shock with basically a complete shutdown of economic activity for a couple of months. And as it happens, the lockdown has kind of extended for much longer than what was sort of originally planned. It was supposed to be 3 weeks, and we are now, as I said, we've crossed 2 months. So in that context, the RBI did ask banks to offer a moratorium to their customers. About 30% of our loan portfolio as of the end of April was under moratorium. As in these are loans where the installments and payments have been deferred. Of course, this moratorium is, the customers still have to pay interest eventually, not now, but they don't get an interest waiver. It's more like a deferment of the principal installments. When we look at the moratorium number, 30% of the loan book, which is, pretty consistent across the large public sector banks, large private sector banks, it's, 26 to 30 odd percent for most of the players which have disclosed that number. We do see that a large number of customers are customers whose, profiles really are pretty healthy. And by, whatever conversations we have and whatever dipstick we do see that a lot of it that is, customers basically exercising caution in the face of really a once in a, lifetime event, which is whose outcomes are very unclear. I think a lot of customers have exercised caution. So, we had corporate customers, take the moratorium and then come back 10 days later and say, we've changed our mind, we don't think we need it. Both on the corporate side and on the retail side, we have customers who have deposit balances with us, but have also opted for the moratorium. And I think, whether it's in some of the products like the corporate lending products or, for instance, mortgages, if you look at it for a retail customer, the mortgage is his or her biggest obligation. It's the chunky repayment that they have to make every month. It's also the lowest cost loan. So economically, it just makes sense to take the moratorium because basically you're getting, 3 months extra financing and conserving cash at your normal rate of interest that you were paying on the loan. So currently we are not too concerned. We don't think that the moratorium is a marker of sort of how the portfolio will eventually perform. And I guess we have to wait for the moratorium to get over and repayments to start, a couple of quarters down the line to get a better sense of, what is the net impact. There will definitely be some impact, but the moratorium itself, we see as a mix of customers who are cautious and those who genuinely need it at this point in time.
If you could also, for this audience, just relate your thoughts on the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Act that was brought into place by the central bank and the government in 2016. what impact is that having on your business so far, and what's the potential for that going forward?
So it's a game changer actually. I think it took some time to stabilize, and I think banks were initially a little wary of using it for the larger accounts, but then that was mandated by the regulator. So we've had some large 3 or 4 large resolutions happening through that mechanism. As with any new law, it took some time for the law and the legal positions and the related infrastructure to stabilize. I mean, we had a number of appeals, both against the law in general and against, specific in respect of specific kind of cases, going right up to the Supreme Court, which gave a number of judgments which we believe have now quite established sort of the constitutionality of the law and the jurisprudence around it. And the next round should be much more smoother and process driven rather than legal questions being debated. But our own feeling is that more than just the recovery, it's a big change in the credit culture of the corporate sector. Because basically what this law says is that, and the related regulations say is that if you default and if you don't cure that default, you lose your business. So, we find sponsors therefore becoming much more, I think, conscious of risk. So the bets they are taking are a little more measured. They're getting in a little more equity. The financing structures, at the level of leverage that they are prepared to live with, is lower. If something goes wrong, they are much more willing to take corrective action earlier. So, if it's about raising more equity, earlier they would have, stuck it out for the last piece of valuation and so on. But today the trade-off is very clear. You either solve it or you lose the company in its entirety. Or if it, to generate liquidity by selling an asset, again, the same delay would have happened earlier. Today, we find them much more amenable to discussing it. So I think it's really helped resolve some of the assets and transition them into good hands. And it's definitely impacting positively the corporate credit culture.
Could you just highlight to us what is the split in the business between residential mortgages and or retail versus corporate?
So, about, as I said, about 62% of our loan book is retail, and about half of that is home mortgages or home loans. The balance will be, autos, commercial vehicles, small business lending, and credit cards and personal loans. About 38% is the corporate and SME business.
Okay. And in terms of capital adequacy, what's the regulatory requirement, and where is ICICI Bank from that perspective?
So we basically look at CET1. So the regulatory requirement is the same as the Basel requirement. We are categorized as a DSIB, a domestic systemically important bank. So we have a slightly higher CET1 ratio to maintain. I think the requirement for us at a CET1 level, my colleagues can correct me, is 8.2%, and we are at 13.4%. So we have, a lot of headroom.
Is identity theft an issue for the bank with, stories that are being read about Aadhaar being compromised and so on?
It's not been a major issue. So I think just as in fact, we are very focused on cyber risk and we spend a lot of energy on it. For example, for the last couple of months, all of us have been working from home. So we have like continuous, review of the protocols, and over the last 3 days, we've inserted sort of new password requirements and multiple kind of factor authentication for me to be able to kind of log into my mail. So in that sense, we are quite focused on it. It has not been a major issue in terms of large scale frauds or anything like that. I think the last major sort of compromise which happened was about 3 years ago when the one of the vendors who was running an ATM network for one of the banks, their system got compromised, and because the ATMs are interconnected, I mean they operate off a national switch, no matter which bank's ATMs they are. Some of the ATM cards and debit cards got compromised, but nothing has happened, which is, in terms of identity theft that I recall of any large scale.
Okay, next question is, real estate has been under stress for some time in India, and COVID will pose further challenges to the sector. What's your assessment of the stress in the real estate sector for India's banking sector and for ICICI Bank?
So, the Indian banking sector's lending to real estate has historically, operated under some safeguards. So, and I think the biggest safeguard is that banks in India are not permitted to finance the purchase of land. They can only finance construction and or can provide financing against completed sort of properties. So, that is a big safeguard because the developers have to use equity or other sources of funding to purchase the land. But the bank does end up getting security over the land. So that is from a asset value recovery perspective, I think a big safeguard. Of course, the real estate sector has been under stress, and for a variety of reasons. The one big reason is that we spoke about the insolvency code. Around the same time, a large real estate reform was introduced in India, which is called the RERA, the Real Estate Regulation Act, which tries to bring in a lot more discipline and transparency into the real estate sector, particularly the residential real estate sector. And I think the developers, particularly the middle or smaller run developers, have had their own tough time adjusting to that. So I think we do see stress in the real estate sector for the system, as well as in parts of our portfolio, which will get further challenged by COVID, particularly in relation to commercial spaces like malls and so on. So we'll have to see kind of how it plays out. In our own case, the portfolio is relatively small. It's about 3% of our loan book, about 220 billion rupees. And we are it's a pretty diversified portfolio. We don't have the chunky exposures there, and our larger exposures would be to the top end developers with whom we are pretty comfortable. So we will see, increasing sort of risk in that portfolio, but in the balance sheet context, it will not, materially skew the numbers, is what we think.
What is the home ownership level in India, and how do you imagine that may grow?
So it's, I don't have the number off the top of my head, but suffice to say that, whether you look at home ownership or the level of, the kind of home the people live in, or metrics like, number of people per unit, etc. India is grossly underpenetrated, and there is, a great deal of potential demand. I think what had happened, over some period of time when economic growth was very high, is that the developers began to focus a lot on the higher end kind of properties, and those ultimately have not found that many takers. So I think now the focus has shifted to more affordable housing, and as those projects get completed and supply comes into the market, we should see a reasonable level of uptick.
Okay, just a couple of questions left, that's all. What is the bank's view on the M&A landscape in India post-COVID? Any particular sectors, according to ICICI, that may see bigger consolidation in India?
I think, it depends on how you define M&A. My guess is that I think in the traditional industrial sectors like, metals or mining, natural resources, and so on, we've seen a lot of M&A already. I think there are two sectors which I can think of. One clearly is real estate, because I think there is still a lot of scope for completed assets to be monetized. So in India, we've seen a lot of that happening in large developments and commercial spaces. And the big global, private equity or other funds, sovereign funds, pension funds, the Brookfields and so on of the world have come in and taken up large chunks of real estate development. And I think that will accelerate, and it will start finding its way into the residential space also, whereas so far it's mainly been on the commercial side. The second sector where we've seen again a fair amount of similar activity is completed assets and infrastructure, particularly more predictable revenue generating assets like roads, airports, and so on. There, I think we'll continue to see activity from the long-term type of investors. Of course, there are some sectors which are particularly impacted by COVID, which is the whole travel, hospitality, aviation kind of space, and we could see some activity there.
Thanks. Yeah, so just one more question. Obviously, the impact of COVID and India's previous slowdown economically has left financials and banks in a difficult position when it comes to those particular effects. One of the focuses of the government is to keep interest rates and lower than rising, and to keep corporate default under control, and to ensure that we don't have any financial contagion. What's your thoughts? There's been some talk in the media about a bad bank, which created to house assets that are troubled. What do you think can improve the outlook for the financials from a immediate perspective, in the sense of concerns around what could happen as a result of unemployment and hardship?
I would say that the banks in general have largely recognized, have largely completed recognition and provisioning of stress arising out of the previous cycle, and have gone into this with much more strengthened balance sheet. I think it's too early to talk about the solutions for the current COVID-induced stress. I think it really depends upon the pace of restart of activity and how quickly it rebounds from here. Because if we, as a loose example, look back at the GFC, I think we had a pretty bad couple of quarters, and then the rebound was quite quick. If something like that happens and we see a reasonable pace of resumption of activity in India and globally as we progress through the current year, I would think that the outcome should be, quite absorbable by the bank's balance sheets. Maybe, a couple of banks which need to raise some capital can raise it, and we can move on. So I don't see, relevance of a bad bank type scenario, type structure, in this scenario that we have today.
Yeah, Mr. Banerjee, I have got one or two questions for a couple of funds who couldn't join in for some reason. I don't know, there is some issue there. But I think the common theme between these questions is with respect to the key learnings that ICICI Bank had during this pandemic. I mean, in terms of your business, some internal processes that you thought got fast tracked, or some myths that got busted. What are your key 3, 4 learnings from COVID or the lockdown that we're going through?
No, I think the big learning is that there's a complete shift in the way of working and the sort of way of interacting with customers. So, for example, our branches are open because banking is categorized as an essential service, and we are required to have branches are open. But virtually, other than that, everything else is being done through work from home kind of modes. Even something like in the call centers, we have deployed technologies to enable people to work from home. So I think it has really opened up uh, the 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 vista in terms of what you can do with technology. And I would say we were already doing a lot, but this I think has shown that basically you can't you can deploy a lot of tools to make the bank more productive and more efficient while not reducing but actually enhancing the customer experience. I think what it has also led to is that customers have become more receptive. So I'll give you one example. We are a large what we call salary account bank. So we do have a lot of corporate clients, all of whose employees open accounts with us, and their salaries get deposited into those accounts. And this time, April, May, as you know, in India is typically the hiring season, or it's the season when new hires come on board into large corporations. So, earlier we would have had one big town hall, physical town hall where we would, explain everything and get forms signed, or even if we were onboarding digitally, they would, have to key in something on a tablet or something. About 2 or 3 months ago, we had launched, in advance of this season, online induction, where nothing, you just need to give us the mail ID, the new trainee or management trainee or whoever can be sitting at home, we'll do everything remotely. And somehow companies were not very receptive because they were used to, the more traditional way of doing things. But now it's like, something which was already there just had to be picked out of the box. If you had told me 2 months ago that we could produce, at the normal time, consolidated financial statements for this bank with maybe barring the last 4 or 5 days, everyone working out of home, I wouldn't have believed it. But basically, we have realized that we can produce financial statements without stepping into the office. So I think a lot of those learnings are there in terms of the way of working and without really impacting productivity. In fact, actually improving productivity.
Just a related question to that, and then the last question. When you talked about productivity, use of technology, do you think structurally cost to income for banks and particularly for ICICI Bank can go down meaningfully in years to come?
I would think so. I would think so because in terms of automation of processes, in terms of virtualizing a lot of interaction, including not just like fund transfers or things like that, but more complex things like trade transactions, export import transactions, and so on. So I think it's literally the sky is the limit. So I think it's
Sure.
very different perspective on how much how many physical servicing things you really need, how much office space you really need, Or do you really need big centralized kind of operations shops, or a lot of it be done remotely?
Sure. Just one last question, and this comes, I think this has been bothering both Mukundan and I at different aspects. Is last year we saw a lot of banks in news for wrong reasons, be it PMC or Yes Bank. I mean, does that, or has that those episodes?
Can you hear me?
Oh, sorry, I my thing was mute. Sorry. So the question comes from a couple of the issues that I and Mukundan have been respectively facing from clients is or investors is with respect to these news about say Yes Bank or PMC. So just wanted your thoughts as to what does that mean for a bank at pole position like ICICI? Has it helped you in any way, and how do you read that going forward?
See, I mean, first thing one must say that these are not desirable events because banking is a business of trust, and it is a business. It's a very interconnected business. So banks, compete and collaborate at the same time because we are, after all, a public utility, a coordinated public utility. So I mean, these are unfortunate events. Thankfully, they are hopefully getting resolved. But I think not just the issues with some of the banks or cooperative banks, which is what PMC was, but even with a couple of the non-banks, with a couple of the so-called credit funds structures. I think all are basically driving more savings towards the banking system, and within the banking system towards the mainline banks. So it's leading to, without any M&A, in some senses, a consolidation in favor of the larger players.
I think that's what it is. We are run out of questions now. Mukundan, over to you.
Yeah, no, that's it from my side as well. So we really thank you for your time, Mr. Banerjee. Appreciate it. Know how busy you are during this time. But it was a great insight into the bank and to the banking industry for clients in Australia and New Zealand. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and we are available to answer any follow-ups or any further issues.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you so much for your time. Stay safe.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks, Aswij. Bye bye.
Thank you.